All right, guys, so I'm going to do my very best to go from front to back on this car with everything done. I'm not going to include the prices in this video, but if enough people request it, I'll write out a sheet and then I'll just post it up on my wall or something. But we will start very front, go on to the way back. Up front, we got a 3-inch intercooler. Outlets, inlet and outlet is at the bottom, but I mean, you can flip it either way. We've got, I put the trans cooler right in front here. Can't even tell you where I got this. I know it was cheap though, probably off eBay, like all the rest of the stuff for this car. This is a radiator that I got off of eBay with 2 fans that came with it. I think this was like $200. Yeah, so again, going back to this, I did buy a universal 3-inch intercooler piping kit for the cold side. Exhaust. So these are stock LS truck manifolds that I flipped around, welded V-bands to. We've got a 2.5-inch exhaust going from each side to the turbo. Now, what I did with the turbo, I did a divided setup. Normally, you have your 2 pipes going into one, then a wastegate, then going in the turbo. What I did is I put each bank individually to the flange. So I do have a divided flange. Each bank is going in. And that's why I have 2 wastegates, because I run low boost in this car. If I didn't do it that way, I'd have a lot of boost creep. So these wastegates are 44 millimeter wastegates I got. These ones are off eBay, but I definitely recommend the VS Racing ones. That's what Ricardo has on his truck, and the quality is really good. I mean, anything VS Racing, in my opinion, is good. And that leads us to the turbo. So this is probably the most expensive component on this. And this is the Gen 2 7875 from VS Racing. I got this last year. It was near when they first came out, I feel like, is when I got this. But I absolutely love this turbo. It spools quick, and like Matt Happel always says, it's a good physical size. It's not like the GT45 where it's just this humongous turbo and it's hard to put somewhere in your engine bay. So it's a nice turbo. It's a good bang for the buck for sure. And then this is a 4-inch exhaust that I got coming out the fender. Believe it or not, I went to the junkyard and found a Power Stroke diesel with an aftermarket exhaust on it. Cut the whole thing off, and I got it for $20, and then I just cut what I wanted to. So that's another little hack you guys can do if you're trying to save money, because these 4-inch pipes are expensive. Going to the intake, the reason this is off is I decided not to run a blow-off valve. We actually put my old blow-off valve on Lewis's car, but I am just going to run a pipe straight here. Don't ask why, I just don't want a blow-off valve anymore. An eBay 92 millimeter throttle body, I think I paid like $60 for that. I do recommend you put Loctite on these screws. I don't know from experience, but from stories. So a lot of these screws will back out and goes in your intake, bye-bye. So let's see what else. We're going back here. The intake. Intake is off a Trailblazer SS. I had a stock intake on this last year, but these work really well with boost. So injectors. I've got Deca 80s in this car. Got Deca 80s, and again, with the Trailblazer SS intake, the stock rail only has 1 feed and not a return line. So you need to buy an aftermarket fuel regulator, which for me, I've got an Aeromotive, and I think these are like $150, but my buddy Sean hooked me up with this one. I think I got it for around 100. So yeah, and as far as, since we're on the fuel subject, I'll just tell you right now, I've got an AEM 380, and I've got a post pump and pre-pump filter ran through. So the feed line is a -8 and my return is a -6, just so you know on that. To the motor. Now the motor is just a Gen 3 260,000 mile 5.3 liter out of a truck. Now what we did, we put a Summit Stage 2 camshaft in. We did Howard valve springs. I can get you the details if you want. And we put new LS7 lifters in, new push rods, and BTR multi-layer head gaskets It's not studded. We just bought new head bolts. We don't stud anything. At least I don't. So other than that, we got the BR7 EF spark plugs. They're a little bit colder. I think we've got some cheap spark plug wires. I've got a $20 oil catch can, which I've got coming from this port right here, going to this port right here. A vacuum block that I got off of Amazon. I think that was like $20 as well. And I've got, most of my stuff going to that. I've got my wastegates going to that, my fuel regulator for boost reference, my boost gauge, all that stuff. So let's see here. This is just a universal throttle cable. I think I got that at AutoZone. It's not a low car cable. Those are expensive. They're nice, but I really didn't need it for this. Other than that, let's get to the turbo drain. So the turbo drain, I tapped into the timing cover. So basically, this is what I did right here, just over there. And I think I've got a 90 coming out of mine as well. And I think that's dash 10 I used going to it for the drain. You want your drain kind of bigger so it doesn't backfeed in the turbo. So yeah, that's how I got it set up. And then since we're here, I'll talk about the feed. So what I did for the feed line, what's nice about these LS motors, hopefully we can get in here. There is a port, right above the oil filter that's comes factory. So this guy right here, there's two 10 mils holding that on. And there's a little hole that you can drill and tap. So I did that, and I have, you can see it right there. I've got my feed, my turbo feed coming from there. And that's that, very easy. Other than that, I think we're about done up here, eh? Oh, wiring harness. It's a completely stock wiring harness that I reworked over last year, and I actually have the stock computer for this car, and it's all inside. I just lengthened the wires and just reworked it. The only thing I did really different with the harness, I guess, besides my plugs for the injectors, which they make like adapter kits, but this right here, instead of like your MAF plug, you can use these two wires. I think it's the black and the tan wire. And what you do is you weld in, or not weld in, I'm sorry. You can drill and tap this guy right here, which is an IAT sensor, intake air temperature sensor. And you can pull that off a lot of older GM vehicles, like my S10, my 99 S10. Those came factory in the intake. So I pulled one off of there, and then I plumbed it into that, cut the connector off it, and splice it in that way. That way your stock computer will read it. The car has 2-step on it right now. You don't really need that at all. I just bought it because I got a deal on it, and it sounds cool. I'm not going to get under the car, but under the car I have a Turbo 400. It's got a BMR torque arm, a UMI transmission cross member to hold it in place. And honestly, the cross member I bought for a 700R4 when this car had one. And I ended up cutting it and welding in some steel to modify it to fit the 400. So you guys on a budget, I'm telling you, if you've got a welder, you're doing great. If you don't have a welder, go to Menards and buy this one. I have a good welder. I have a good 220 welder, but I don't have 220 in this garage. I have welded everything up with this $240 welder from Menards. It's great. I have no problems, no issues. And again, with the hot side, like I built this whole hot side with that. These are all V-banded. Get these V-bands off of Amazon for like $20. And they work great. The rear end, everybody keeps asking me about this car. Yes, it's the weak link. It's an 87 formula, I believe, for this year, or for this style rear end, and it's a 342 posi with rear disc brakes. So instead of drums, I've got rear disc now, which is nice. Yeah, I'm not really going to get into this stuff because it's all kind of just gauges and a shifter. You can put whatever you want in there. I relocated the battery to the back, and I do have a cutoff. There's actually my cutoff switch, and I just kind of plumbed it right in there. So just flip that switch and basically disconnect your battery. For the fuel system, I told you the fuel system, but what I have to do the inline, I bought a stock tank because my old one was just junk, and I welded in a sump for it. It was really cheap off eBay. I think that was like 20 bucks. But I welded that up, and it's got 2 ports coming out of it, and I have my fuel line ran that way. So if you're running an inline fuel pump, you definitely want a sump. Just for, I mean, how else are you going to do it, really? And you don't want the chance of you making a pull and not getting enough fuel in. The sump will allow you to, all that fuel will sit inside the sump. You know, it's like a little cup on the bottom. And if you drill the holes, all that fuel will drain in and kind of hold itself. And that's the lowest point of the tank. So if you're running out of fuel there, that means you have no fuel in the tank. So sump is definitely the way to go with inline. And why did I do inline? It's easy. Dropping the tanks on these are a bitch. And honestly, if I ever want to do repairs or upgrades, it's all in line. I just have to lift the car and get underneath. So this car, if I push it, I'll end up putting another AEM 380 in it, and I'll just wire it in. I don't have to really take much apart. The tank can stay up, and it's all is good. So yeah, I think that is just about covering it. Other than that, I've got Lakewood drag shocks in the back. I mean, they're just stock replacements, but they're Lakewoods, and the front suspension is 100% stock and old. Sit here and bounce it, but it's a fun car. To be honest, and I tell everybody that this is just a thrown together cheap build, realistically from front to back on this car, including the wheels and tires, which there's a grand there, it's probably about $5,000 or $6,000 in this car. And that's honestly pretty cheap for all the stuff. Like I said, I got the good turbo. I mean, that was close to $1,000 when it first came in. I think I paid $800 for it. I mean, they're a little bit cheaper now, but you know, you pay. I wasn't gonna wait a year to get a turbo, so I just jumped on it. But yeah, I mean, and that's everything. Like, that's the 400. That's, you know, the cross member and stuff like that. Oh, I have a stock sway bar, but I've got poly bushings. I'll probably upgrade to sway bar this year. We'll see about that, but I mean, yeah, it's really not a lot of money, and you can definitely do it for cheaper. Like, you don't have to get this. You can use the stock intake, but I have a lot of you guys asking the setup on this car and how I did it, and I think that just about covered it. So the motor mounts on this car I got off of eBay. They were 60 bucks shipped, and they're just 3rd gen LS Camaro swap mounts. Nothing major. And that about covers it. So if you guys have any other questions on this, just feel free to shoot me a message, comment. You know, whatever questions you have, I will answer. So yeah. Oh, sorry. The oil pan on this. A 4th gen F-body oil pan. That's what I got. My buddy Curtis Templeton hooked me up on that. But you can definitely buy them. I mean, you can buy them new. And that's what works on this. Don't get the muscle car swap pan for these. It will not work. Luckily, I bought that. It didn't work on this. I was able to use it for my S10. But that's that. So yeah, guys, I hope this clears a lot of stuff up for this. Like I said, if not, just shoot me a message.